Moat on the volley, and back corner. What a start for West Bromwich Albion. Unbelievable! West Bromwich Albion have ruined his big day.
Line again, and it's Adam Wingy who gets the final touch, and West Bromwich Albion now have a 2-goal cushion.
The Baggies Podcast, giving you the latest news, views and opinions on all things Albion. Hello and welcome back to the Baggies Podcast, where of course we're giving you all the latest news, views and opinions on all things Albion. We're back again today with another match reaction episode to chat about the past week of Albion action. Today we're going to be talking about the 0-0 draw against Nottingham Forest. But before we get into the episode, make sure to subscribe on your podcast platform, whether that's on YouTube or on your Spotify's or your Apple Podcasts, and leave us a nice review if you've enjoyed the episode as well. But for today, we kidnapped another member of a different podcast. We kidnapped Jamie from the Hawthorns Debate Club Podcast. Jamie, how are you doing, mate? Welcome to the show.
It's lovely to be here, Lou. Thank you. I like being introduced as a hostage to people. Love yours. And that's reassuring, I know, for people that I'm being looked after and well kept while I'm here. So thanks for having us on, mate. It's great to be here.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. Pleasure to have you on. Pleasure to kidnap another guest for this week. But yeah, Jamie, you, of course, have a massive hand in the Hawthorns Debate Club Podcast, another Albion podcast. How long have you been doing that for, and what sort of stuff do you do on there?
Yeah, well, it's me, my brother, and my good friend Alex Collins, and we just have conversations and discussions about West Brom, the same as everyone else doing. And I can tell you exactly when it was, actually, when we decided that we were going to actually have a little bit of an Albion podcast. It was, well, the first week we hit record on our conversations, you know, when we lost to Liverpool last season and Alisson scored the header, that was our first ever podcast, was reacting to that match. So it was a really odd circumstance to decide that we're going to kind of celebrate West Brom and talk about West Brom and all of these things. But yeah, that was when we decided to do it. We never thought anyone would really listen to it apart from our dads. But then people have been listening, and that's been really good. And I think that's because Albion fans, you know, are very gracious and supportive, yourself and all of the other people who've kind of helped us along the way. And I genuinely think that, like, the purpose of our podcast, if that's a thing that your podcast can have, is to try and sprinkle some fun and then more often than not some calm onto like the despair and misery of supporting West Brom. Because I know we all feel like that sometimes. And yeah, the podcast, we've been doing it now once a week. We're pretty regular with it. Sometimes we're not as good as others, but yeah, it's been about, I don't know, pre-relegation to wherever we're at now.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it sounds like a blast. And obviously you can check out Jamie, Alex, and you know, the podcast that you're doing over there. So with the links in the description. But yeah, you're doing a cracking job over there, and obviously we'll come to a little bit more about what you guys have got special going on over there towards the end of the episode. But Jamie, what we've dragged you in for is a bit of a dissection, unfortunately. You weren't at the game, which probably in the end worked out in your favour, as we spoke about some pretty horrible weather conditions that some of us Albion fans had to endure. But obviously, following the Blackpool game on Tuesday, going into this game, what sort of were your thoughts? Were you optimistic going into this one? How were you feeling?
Firstly, I've never been so relieved to not be at the game. I was watching it on TV and I could see all the people in the East End absolutely taking a beating off Mother Nature. And I could see my seat in the Woodman corner just like being like vacated and empty. And I'm thinking like I've been kind of held back from being there. But I guess watching the Blackpool game, going into the Forest game, we've all been waiting for that performance that convinces us that things are fixed now, and all of a sudden Albion are going to be foul ball again, and it's going to be heart attack ball, and it's going to be so exciting to watch the Albion. There's going to be chances, and not just chances, goals, and we're going to suddenly dominate teams again, a little bit like the Sheffield United match, and all of the first 30 seconds of the Blackburn game spring to mind. Because whenever I'm watching them more recently, I'm never, even when we've had good results, I'm never convinced that it's anything more than papering over the cracks. And I guess the Blackpool game felt like that again. It felt like we were papering over the cracks again. There was chances and it was exciting. There was a few opportunities. And I know people have been decrying our strikers. But I guess it left you with that kind of taste in your mouth that we're still on a path here. We're still struggling to get to where we want to be. And I guess I'm really used to going to Albion matches, or at least preparing to watch, coming away from Albion matches feeling miserable. But like at the moment, I'm going to Albion matches miserable. I feel like a can of pop that's being shaken up before I get in, and it's going to take like the smallest kind of indiscretion by an Albion player or a misplaced pass or something the referee does, and I'm just going to go like wild in the Woodman corner. It hasn't happened yet, but if you do see stewards dragging someone out, like, but I'm never going into games at the moment convinced that Albion are going to perform the way I want them to perform. I'm convinced that we can get a result, but I am genuinely always skeptical, even when I see the lineup, that we're going to perform to a level that's going to be dominating, essentially. And that's how I felt about this Forest game.
Yeah, it just felt like, the Blackpool gave you kind of a bit of a papering over the cracks feel, didn't it? Because, looking at that game, you think, look at all the chances we've created. All it needs is just a finishing touch. And I think that's where Albion kind of fell down a little bit, because I feel like we built them up a little bit after that game, thinking all it needs is that finishing touch and expecting that finishing touch to come, when in fact the inevitable was the finishing touch just isn't there in this squad. And it hasn't been since, probably the first, 5 or 6 or 7 games or whatever it was when we started to really play. And it just feels like we're kind of just constantly doing the same sort of performance over and over again, and seeing a little bit of glimmer of hope going into the next game with that glimmer of hope. But I'm in complete agreement with you. I don't think there's much joy in going to an Albion game or watching them on the telly. It feels a bit more like a chore or something. And then as you said there, it takes one of those incidents, and then all of a sudden the whole crowd's erupted, and we all want to go home. It's just not a nice sort of atmosphere to be in at the moment as an Albion fan at all.
No, and I think like I say, I just agree with you, because you go there and you, like you say, you're carrying there's this weight that come in with going to the games, because you're like, oh gosh, is it just going to be the same as every other week? And for me, it's like, I was going into that game against Nottingham Forest, and beating Nottingham Forest wasn't going to be enough. It wasn't just enough to get 3 points against Nottingham Forest. I almost feel like Albion are at a stage now where even winning isn't good enough. We're at a stage now where it demands a performance that reassures the fans more so than just winning. And like I say, it has to be this convincing win that kind of puts to bed a lot of the doubts. And I know, I said this on our podcast last week, I know how fickle fans can be. When we're low, we're low. And when we're high, and everyone's singing and celebrating. But I don't know if this is fickle with Albion fans. I know we're not playing the way we want to play, but I'm not sure what gets us through this. I'm not sure if it's just a couple of wins and everything's fixed. It doesn't feel like that to me. It feels much more bad-tempered than that, and moody. It feels like I'm not quite sure what brings us, and Val especially, back onto kind of like a hopeful trajectory, because results certainly won't do it, I don't think.
Yeah, what may bring it out for me, I think, is just a few good performances, and I mean, like, hopefully with a win as well, because I think, if we start to play like that we did at the start of that season, I think that's all I'm personally asking for. That's all I want to see, is that we've got the energy, we've got the complete desire, we've got the willpower, we're outrunning, out battling teams, and that's all I really want to see from Albion. I think from a personal perspective, I don't know what would float your boat in this situation, Jamie. What do you think would make things all better for you?
It's really difficult to put your finger on what's wrong, isn't it, when you're looking at the Albion? Because like you say, I know people like external to Albion look at it and you're like, well, you're third. What are you moaning about? How can you be complaining? It's like Bournemouth and Fulham are really good sides. Like, just be happy that you are where you are. And so then when you kind of confronted by that one voice, but then when you go to the game, you're like, what I'm seeing, there's something fundamentally not working about this system that we're trying to play. And then you try and think to yourself, well, is it just about the combination of players that we had? The conversation more often than not for the first, I don't know, ever since the Arsenal game, I'm convinced that's where it started to really teeter off, but was what's the perfect combination of players that's going to suddenly lend itself to this cataclysmic performance that elevates us to the top of the league again. And then you're watching it and it's not quite happening. And I think for me, I'd like to see some change. I don't know specifically what it is. I think it would involve having players on the pitch that have a little bit more of a creative output rather than just demanding that the system in of itself is the creative output. Actually, to have players on the pitch whose responsibility is to do defense splitting passes and break the lines and whatnot. I'd like to see more of that. I think we did try that a little bit more at Forest. I think there was a few, and Blackpool actually saying that there was some more of those chances where it was played on the ground through the channels. And I think that for me is a step in the right direction, but it's very difficult to pinpoint one specific thing that would kind of put a smile back on my face.
Yeah, I think it is difficult, and I think a lot of Albion fans would feel the same as you there, Jamie. With they just can't quite work out, because that I look back at a result like the Peterborough one, where I'd have thought even though I'd say we're pretty poor for most parts of the game and kind of got away with a win there, that the result was fine. I thought the result brought Albion fans a smile because things weren't quite as bad as we thought at that point. But that sort of performance has been replicated so many times this season without that 1-0 at the end or that goal at the end that's kind of just got us out of jail. That same performance has sort of duplicated itself several times, Millwall, Derby, Preston, those sorts of games. And we kind of haven't found that finishing touch to sort of get us out of jail. And I think Val is feeling the heat now from those sorts of games.
Totally agree.
Because he hasn't got that goal at the end of it, because he hasn't got Carlan Grant, who's come up with a goal late on in the game, like the QPR game or like the Birmingham game, those sorts of ones. I feel like he's feeling that heat because that finishing touch or that one goal that gets you out of that jail just hasn't come for him. I feel like the system's all sort of working in a way, but it's not working in a results-based manner as it was at the beginning of the season. I don't know what you make of that take there, Jamie.
I guess for me, it's like it seems to have turned into a bit of a style of play where the ends justify the means, kind of like, so long as you get that goal, so long as you fumble the ball into the net at some point during the 90 minutes, the system's working. And a little bit at the moment, I feel like Val's coming across a little bit, especially in like his post-match interviews, he's coming across a little bit like a used car salesman. He's trying to convince me that I'm seeing something I'm not seeing, and I can see the cracks and I can see the parts hanging off, and he's trying to tell me, well, that will make it go faster, and that's actually a really good thing, and all of these things. And I totally agree. The way we've played, essentially, I don't think has changed too much. I think it was probably more effective at the start of the season. I do believe that the intensity has dropped since the start of the season. I don't see this frantic pressing. Against Bournemouth, I couldn't believe what we was doing. It seemed like kamikaze football, heart attack football, I know everyone was using. And then we went into the next game, Blackburn, we started like, you couldn't believe how fast we were out the traps. And then it was the Arsenal game. I don't know how many people kind of pinpoint that as the exact moment. I don't know whether Val kind of suddenly got scared about his system. And I know Arsenal were kind of some sort of like champions of Europe, the way they handled our under 23 side, and like they were all delighted with themselves. But I don't know whether Val got scared or he lost kind of complete faith in this frantic pressing combined with the high line. And ever since then, you have like the Peterborough game where we didn't seem to kind of be actively and as aggressively pressing. And I think a lot of people then started, the conversation turned to, well, have people figured Albion out? My issue is, if people have figured us out, it doesn't say an awful lot about the system. Now, it's been nullified so effectively by what appears to be just a low block and then balls over the top of a high line. And then every team is just replicating that and getting the same result. And we are getting the same results from applying the system. I said it last week, again, on our podcast, that Albert Einstein quote about insanity, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. We're getting the same results as we did against Peterborough more often than not. We just haven't scraped the goal.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, we kind of just, we've done that performance so many times, but the Peterborough game was just different because we ended up with a win at the end of it. This time we're not those wins aren't coming. That Arsenal game was so telling for me, because for me, the amount of changes that he made told me these players won't be able to handle that frantic style of play twice or whatever it is, 3 times a week that you tend to play in the Championship. You know, your Saturday, Wednesday, Saturday sort of schedule. That's what it told me, and that was what worried me, because I just thought if he's having no first team players in that squad whatsoever that he thinks is going to play the next game, that's telling me that they can't play on a Saturday, Tuesday, Saturday, whatever it is. That's what it told me, and that was what worried me, because I thought now we're going to see a change in system, because there's no way they can keep that up, or we're going to see less of those performances that we're going to saw. And as you said there, we went straight into the next game, Peterborough, and produced a performance that was just completely unlike what we'd seen at the start of the season. It was slow, it was hard working, and it was battling, but it certainly wasn't frantic certainly wasn't high intensity. It was, we did work hard. I thought that we worked hard for the win in the end, and I don't think we were very good on the ball or anything, but we certainly did try hard. But it wasn't high intensity to any extent, was it?
No, I just think it's been flat ever since then. That's the only word I can use to describe it. It's been flat. I know the atmosphere has soured over the last few weeks at the Albion, but I guess for me, one of the things that I'm not a football manager. I'm not an expert about football. I don't know particularly much. I don't know why I do a podcast about the Albion, but for me, when you're in the situation that Val is in and Albion are in, this constant replication of the same tactic, system, philosophy, whatever you want to call it, and then, like I say, expecting something different, it's not materializing in any kind of way that, like I say, is going to look anything more than papering over the cracks, like we said at the start. And then for me, I think, and this is where I think a lot of fans are at now, well, then surely it demands a change in of itself. It demands some sort of kind of concession. The system doesn't function the way I want it to function. Thus, or other teams have figured this out and have now kind of found ways to cause us difficulty in doing what we want to do, at least. Well, then what we'll do is we'll react to that. We will proactively change what we're doing. And maybe there's been bits and pieces. We certainly don't seem to be as just long ball, but overall, like the 3-4-3. I mean, I've never felt so strongly about a kind of formation in my life now. I've never had strong feelings about a formation, and now all of a sudden 3-4-3 is like some sort of bane of my existence. You feel like at some point Val and his team would look at 3-4-3 and say, maybe we just try something different. Maybe we don't kind of have the wing backs covering the entire length of the pitch. Maybe we do want to try some people in midfield. And it feels like there's a really obvious starting point there to bring a catalyst of change in like where we are as a club, at least something that you could really concretely do to change the way we play on Sundays now, or Sunday, Saturdays, whenever it is, sorry. But like, that's something you could really just have a think about, change it up. And I think a lot of managers would. And it's this kind of stubborn streak of Val. I don't want to be unfair on the guy because he just comes across as a really lovely man, but it just comes across as really inflexible. And I understand that he's looking to establish an identity and a culture. And I think all of those things are really, really important. But I don't know whether his kind of sticking to his guns in this situation is in the long run going to cost him his job, because like I say, I don't think even results look like they could save him at this point. I think the performances have to significantly change alongside really positive results.
Yeah, because we saw, like, throughout the season, we saw throughout this season so far that people are, even when we were winning, people were complaining quite heavily. So it is going to take more than a few wins on the spin with, that like the Peterborough game to really change people's mind. Because, I remember seeing I can't remember which game we actually won last, to be quite honest, but whichever game that was, people were just saying, that's still a terrible result. That's still, that's still a terrible game. Why are people cheering that? Why are people applauding that? And why, people are still getting behind the team. It was the whole game. We weren't massively fantastic in that game. Hull weren't great to either, to say the least. But people were still, even though we won, people were like, why are people cheering? Because this is just the same performance, but at this time we've got a result at the end of it. But Jamie, sort of like, with Val, are you one that wants to stick with him, or are you somebody that trying to hound him out already after less than 4 months in charge?
It's such a tricky one, isn't it? Because so many of us are leaving the games and we're like, the results haven't pulled the wool over my eyes here. And I don't know how it's happened, but Val has somehow made winning miserable. And that seems like a really really powerful thing to have transformed the sensation of victory into something that kind of causes great waves of sadness for people. I like Val. I do. I want to give him a chance. I think it's very difficult to establish an identity and a culture in a side. All of those kind of sports buzzwords around kind of team building, etc. It's difficult to do that with one transfer window, a pre-season, and kind of the first, whatever we're into a season, I don't know, 2/5 or whatever we are into a season now. I think he would benefit from a transfer window. I don't think he'll get there, or I don't think he'll get to see the fruits of that transfer window, at least is probably a better way of saying it. I don't think he's going to be allowed to see this whole journey out, because I think most people have said it now, third seems about par for the course. And I think it's going to be more of a struggle to hold on to third than to progress onwards. I think Bournemouth and Fulham are just in the distance now. Where do I sit with him personally staying as manager? Oh man, I really don't know. That feels like such a tough question to ask. I want to keep him because I just hate that knee-jerk reaction of, I want to give him a chance. I really want to give him a chance to do something positive. But if it carries on like this, it's so hard. It's soul destroying watching Albion, even when we win, and that's not right. That has to change. And if he's unwilling to change, to rectify the performances, then yeah, he's got to go.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are willing to see him until probably the end of that January window, see who he gets in, see who he manages to convince the board to allow him to have, and let him sort of bed those players in, and then see. But as you said, by that time, it may well be the case that we're not in third, because at the moment that's what a lot of fans, including myself, are sort of clinging to, going, we are still third. We are still in the mix. I know Fulham and Bournemouth are way better than us, and I think it would be ridiculous if we overtook one of them at some point this season. But I keep saying to myself, we are third. It's all right. We aren't in an awful position. But those teams like Coventry, who we play on Saturday, which we'll talk about in a little bit, those teams are creeping up behind us and they're coming towards us, and we couldn't well find us outside of the playoffs if we don't pick up at least results, let alone the performances. I mean, these teams are coming behind us, and as Albion, I think we should be in the side that we've got. I don't think it's as bad our side as people are making out at the moment. I don't think it's ideal for Val ball at all, but I don't think this side is as bad as people are making out. But in comparison to the ones that are creeping up behind us, I think we should be worried that those teams are going to overtake us, if you get what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at the kind of squad as we've got it, and it's on paper, I think it is one of at least the top three sides in the Championship. I would swap players in the Fulham and Bournemouth squad, but then when you look around the league, it's kind of, I feel like the general quality of the league this season is quite poor, really. And the top six, the teams who are in the top six, including ourselves, I guess there seems to be like Bournemouth, Fulham, and Albion, and then kind of a kind of significant gap between pretty much everyone else. And yet I am terrified to play the other teams in the top six. I think someone said to me, and I don't know how true this is, but I'm going to say it like it's true, and people can go away and fact check me if they want. But ultimately, I don't think we've beaten a team in the top six. Is that true this season? We haven't won or anything like that?
We've beaten Blackburn, I think is.
Are they in it now?
Yeah, I think they're behind us now. They're fourth.
Well, there you go. It was at some point during this season we hadn't beaten some in the top six, and I think my concern is that people have identified different types of football that they think Val ball works well against. And I think like people are, when they blast it out from the back, we're going to be class against teams like that because we'll press them and get the ball off them and stuff like that. But then like Stoke just smashed us, and Swansea smashed us, and Fulham smashed us, and I'm just concerned that third is great, but promotion is the aim. And if you've got to go by a third and the players and whatnot, I'm concerned that the teams we're going to come up against are are going to really not have that much difficulty playing against us if we're going to be playing the same way in 5 months, 6 months' time as we are today. And that's my big concern, really.
Yeah, and I think that I think in terms of that top six, I think Albion, I got myself quite annoyed at the start of this kind of sort of meltdown from Albion fans where, things started to go a bit awry. And I was thinking, realistically, we should. I sort of came in my head that they were sort of thinking that we have some sort of divine right to be top of the championship because we've been there. We've got such an amazing record in the division.
But we don't have that.
Yeah, no. I was thinking that people, people were thinking, we have this divine right, and I was looking at them and I was thinking, that's a bit strange. But now I look back at it, I think, we should be holding ourselves to higher standards than, third will do. Third will be fine. We should be looking for the third. I know we should. I don't think we're as good as Fulham and Bournemouth, but we should be at least trying to, really batten down their door and trying to get into that top two. And if we can sneak in there come the end of the season, then, that'd be lovely. But we certainly should. Like, I've seen Albion fans going, what do you expect from this squad? It's the third best in the league. But that doesn't mean you can't have a go and try and knock people out off their perch, because, Bournemouth's results looks fantastic now. The result we got against Bournemouth 2-2, but the Fulham game was awful. But if we can just beat one of these sides, and we keep the momentum going, there's no reason why we shouldn't be asking questions of that top two and trying to break in there, because our side's not, as you said, probably the third best side in the division. So we can certainly knock one of those off their perch. And I think that Albion fans suggesting that this is the best that we can do is a bit unambitious in my opinion.
I think it's one of those things. I'm with you. Like, I don't want to be third, but I'll tolerate being third if it's the gap that's offensive between us and Fulham and Bournemouth.
Yeah.
Like this major, and we're not that far into the season. Somehow they've pulled that far ahead of us already, and I think that's the part that's troubling. I understand that they might do better than us in the long run, but I thought there would be kind of some sort of contest involved in the league this season, and I think that's something to be concerned about, because I agree with you. I do think like they probably do have stronger squads than us. However, we've got a competitive squad. I don't feel like we might not have the divine right, but we certainly haven't got like a paupers side. We should be there or thereabouts. And I think that's been really disappointing. And I think, like I say, they're so far ahead now. It's almost the situation we had with Leeds and Albion at the end of the season with the pandemic. Like, Brentford went on an amazing run that year. When they came back out of lockdown, and it still wasn't enough to get them promoted automatically. They still couldn't catch us up. And if you look at Bournemouth and Fulham this season, they're not invincible. No. Teams are taking points off them left, right, and centre, and it just feels like we're not capitalising. And so you've got these kind of, I guess, teams that are quite a significant distance ahead, but they seem fragile, and yet at the same time, we don't seem to be able to kind of close that gap, and that's worrying for me. And I've started to find myself like, looking over our shoulders rather than worrying about can we catch them up. It's worrying about who's going to catch us up. And like you say, Blackburn have snuck up on me and I didn't even know.
Yeah, I think I just had it up on my phone there. They are currently 1 point behind us, so they are, and so are Coventry as well. So yeah, well, they're definitely creeping up behind us, and it's something that we need to fix up, because all of a sudden we won't have we're third to sort of cling to or have as a bit of a comfort blanket. But Jamie, January's coming, and it's just around the corner, and we're hoping that that's going to be a bit of a make or break for Val, or make or break for the side in terms of additions. What would you like to see done in January that's plausible that we could potentially get done in January that may improve the squad?
That's such a significant kind of caveat there. It has to be plausible, does it? I think the one thing that we needed before the season started, and I think most people were disappointed that we didn't get, was kind of a spearhead to the attack. We've got so many attacking options. It's baffling, like left wingers for days, but everyone wanted the number 9, the kind of central figure in that. I know we flirted with Matt Phillips playing there, and there's been different combinations, and then Jordan Hugill came in, and he's become kind of a little bit of a punching bag now for everyone. And I think we've got to target a player who's clinical, who finishes these chances, the chances that were missed against Blackpool, the chances against Forest again. There were some just opportunities that just are begging for someone who's lethal in front of goal and who can just stick the ball in the back of the net. I think you kind of at the moment you're seeing our attacking players. They can score goals. We know they can score goals. Callum Robinson goes onto a pitch with Cristiano Ronaldo and wins man of the match. The guy's quality. Carlin Grant, you've seen if he gets the ball and drives at goal and he can score goals. I think what we're looking for is that more of the poacher predator type, even if it's a target man, but like someone in the mold of Dwight Gale that doesn't have all of these other qualities that Carlin Grant, Dean Garner, I was going to say Matt Phillips, but I'm not going to, and Carlin Grant have. They don't have all of these kind of intrinsic little bits of skill, but he just puts the ball in the back of the net. And that's what I think. I think that's the number one priority Albion need.
Yeah, it's definitely the big hole that Albion need to fill. And you know, if Dwight Gale, I mean, I've just been longing for him to come back ever since that loan spell, and we all know that we all know that it might not happen. But to be fair, in you know, considering they've had new owners, Newcastle, and you know he's not played. We may be, even for our owners, we may be able to get something done on the cheap that might
genuinely looked quite emotional then for a second.
Yeah,
when you were talking about
I was looking off into the distance. Then I was thinking about his goal against Stoke. Him. What was that? Whatever skill move you call that.
Should we have a moment? Maybe, I don't know. Just
that's a
contemplate.
Moment to just We'll pause the episode here. Feel free to pause and just
reflect in your own space now.
Reflect in your own space, just about how good Dwight Gale was. Yeah, I was just looking off into the distance, ready to reminisce over that. But you know, he could come in if Newcastle, you know, obviously probably want rid of him. Let's be fair in January, because he's not. I think he's made one appearance so far this season, and that's been for literally 2 minutes. But I feel like if you know, he could be done on the cheap, and I'm sure the owners would love that. So I feel like he may be an option. I mean, people saying he wouldn't fit into Val Ball. I think anybody who can score is gonna fit into Val Ball at the moment of whatever Val Ball is. So
yeah,
I
think that's where I'm at as well. I'm not who is the players that fit into Val Ball, because I feel like at the moment it feels a little bit like square pegs round holes. Like the players that we currently have don't seem to fit Val Ball, and I know Alex Mowatt's brought in as kind of this like champion of Val Ball. But I'd be happy to see Dwight Gale. I hope it's not like I call it like Ishmael Miller syndrome. Like the player who's not on the pitch is kind of this messianic figure that's going to come and rescue us from our plight. The white shining armor and all of that stuff. And I don't know if Dwight Gale's going to be that, but I'd like to see him. The other one that gets mentioned an awful lot is Daryl DK. And he looks really, really impressive. But then, I mean, you may know more about this than me. I hear figures bandied around, and I'm just like, as exciting as that is, I don't want to get my hopes up there, because I'm afraid that the board won't. They're not going to splash out if they're asking for multiple millions of pounds. But he's another one that when you see the goals every now and again, they'll pop up from, is it Orlando City he's at? Oh, yeah. I would have me some Daryl DK, no problem.
Yeah, every Albion fan always likes them always likes the goal highlights, and I always see them on the Twitter feed, and I'm just like, he just looks everything that we might need. And then I see a couple of days later, I'll see a journalist put in he's £15 million, and I just look at it and I go, no. But to be fair, if we could do our usual, a little loan with an obligation to buy at some point, if we ever get promoted, he could be the one. He could be the one to come and bring us out the mess. But I think a cheap version would probably be Gale. But then again, I think he'd be just as adequate. But I can't picture a player that fits his system well. But looking ahead now to Coventry, it's obviously looking a massive game with them only a point behind us, as we've just discovered there. How are you feeling going into this one, and what do you think we can do to hopefully get a result?
I mean, I don't know how much we've reacted to the Forest game, but like watching the Forest game, and again, I'm left feeling the same way that I did about the Blackpool game, that I've watched Albion throw themselves against the elements and the weather and come away empty-handed, and I'm like, I feel like we've got a repeat performance on our hands. potentially.
Yeah.
Like, I really do feel like Coventry are playing exciting football. They've got players that can hurt teams, and Forest don't seem to have them in abundance, and Blackpool didn't seem to have them in abundance. And I'm worried that Coventry won't just have that kind of dig-in and gritty performance that is demanded against Albion. I think they might have enough quality to really upset us. So I would be very, very much concerned about this game. I'm not confident at all going to this game. I know we've got like 1 billion fans going there, which is cool.
Yeah.
But I feel like we've had this in the past, like the Stoke game springs to mind, where the Albion fans were amazing going away to that, and it's just these poor people that travel. Even the Huddersfield game the other week, I'm like, and Blackpool. Once you start, you can't stop going. There's just this endless list of games where Albion have been significantly disappointing. I think it's going to be bad.
Yeah, I praise all the Albion fans who went to, especially Blackpool on a Tuesday night. That must have been a nasty trek, but they sang all the way through despite the performance.
Yeah.
So fair play to them. They really do a smashing job, and certainly nicer than that home atmosphere. But obviously, there's a bit of a gap in midfield now. With I don't know if you've seen the news about Snodgrass, Jamie, with him potentially being free to leave in January. That does suspect that there's something that's gone on behind the scenes that perhaps that may have caused that possible exit. What would you do in the midfield? Because at the moment it's Alex Mowat or nothing at the moment in terms of injuries and suspensions in there.
It's really, I mean, the midfield for me is probably our weakest point on the pitch. I know people decry the lack of finishing in the front three. I think obviously the high line has had its foibles, and people have really struggled with that, and the role of kind of, does Taylor Gardner-Hickman come in down at Furlong? But it's the midfield that's the biggest chink in the armour for me. I totally agree. And I think all of the combinations of players, we've seen every potential combination now, I think, at this point, Snodgrass, Livermore, Mowat and Malumbi. And none of it works ultimately. I feel like really kind of almost guilty, I'd say, about how kind of much I was kind of like anti-Jake Livermore, not him as a human being. I'm sure he's lovely, but his performances were just really poor at the start of the season. And then there was the whole, he's the captain, so he plays every week kind of Val thing. And I thought Livermore being in the squad was the issue. Now I'm not convinced that that's true at all. I think it's the way the midfield, what is demanded of a midfield in the Val system, the 3-4-3. There's just too much for them to do. They're meant to defend, pick up the ball from the back, bring it forward, spread it wide, challenge, contest second balls, press, get in the box, create chance. There's too much to do for two people. It's like the job of many, many people, not just two. And now that we've only got one, I really don't know what the solution is. I feel like there's stuff that happens at the Albion, and I don't know whether there are always bad things like Jake Livermore getting suspended or Malumbi getting suspended, but sometimes I'm like, is this a blessing in disguise? Because it's going to force Val's hand. He's going to have to do something different now. He can't just swap out one piece and plug in another piece and hope that in of itself is enough. The Snodgrass thing blows my mind that Snodgrass is going. I know Snodgrass hasn't really had much of a bite of the cherry at the Albion. He had that game against Wolves. And then since then, you haven't really seen much of him. Now, he made his name as a winger, and we've only ever tried him in central midfield in this system where central midfield is this kind of absolutely insane engine that is required, and it's just obviously not the way he plays football. I don't know if you've ever watched him at half time when he's a sub warming up. It is honestly, the guy is on a different level quality wise to the rest of them. Like, I've watched Hugo and a few of the other guys, they'll be warming up, but his touch on the ball is just extraordinary. You can see the guy just oozes quality, and he is that creative type of player that I don't know if Val is interested in. I know that we talk a lot about this system that Val's got, and I've never spoke so much about 3-4-3 in my life, but he is convinced that the system is what creates the chances. You win the ball further up the field, Therefore, your shooting opportunities are close to goal, and that's
Yeah.
a positive thing. And therefore, you don't need an individual player who's responsible on the pitch to create those chances. And I guess Snodgrass, by his very kind of career and his qualities, is that one of those types of players. So I can see why he's found himself out of favour and surplus to requirements. But if we're talking about types of players that I would target in January, I think we need to be targeting a player who can assume the responsibility of creating chances when the system fails to create chances, like Pereira.
Yeah.
I mean, him in this side, he might not fit into foul ball, but when foul ball doesn't work, you've got another option. And I think Snodgrass is the only other player we have like that. And so for him to be, like you say, he's no longer required by the club, I'm kind of speechless, really.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't seen him warming up. I did see Jordan Hugill warm up the other day, and he did fall over the sky thing that all the players walk out by. That was quite interesting. This wasn't at halftime. This was before the game. He was trying to do some keepy ups, and he walked backwards into that and fell over it. But yeah, not quite oozing the class that perhaps Robert Snodgrass does during his warm up. But there's got to be something that's gone on behind the scenes there from Snodgrass, because you can't go from, looking like you're perhaps starting most games in the midfield to all of a sudden not on the bench, not in the side, and then all of a sudden the story comes out saying that he's actually not needed at the club at all. And considering the lack of centre, well, I won't say lack, but you need two centre midfielders every game, and look at the way we are now with only one left, and to be able to say that he's potentially leaving the club is very interesting. But Jamie, before we kind of release you back to your home of the Hawthorns Debate Club, I hear you've got a nice little giveaway going on over on your podcast. Would you like to tell us a little bit about what that entails and how the listeners of your podcast and this one can get involved?
Yeah, so a few weeks ago, we started having a little bit of a chat with a person that many of you will know, probably listen to the podcast now. He's on Instagram and various other different social media platforms, WBA RT Inspired. And he does digital prints to do with the Albion and stuff like that. And he is very generously kind of supporting us in the giveaway of a signed Chris Brunt digital print. It would look very spectacular behind you, might I say. I'm just saying, if you want to get involved, you're more than welcome. But essentially, all we're looking to do is trying to get the podcast to more ears. And obviously, it's very generous of you to allow us to come on and share just the conversation, but ultimately share what we're about as well. And yeah, we're just looking for people to listen and share all of our stuff on Instagram. And when you do that, we'll put you into a giveaway draw. And in the next couple of weeks, we're going to be giving away this Chris Brunt thing, and it can be on your mantelpiece or wherever you choose to put your most treasured items in your house. You can find a home there as well. And at the moment, we are doing a little to kind of back on to this giveaway. If you go onto his website, rtinspired.co.uk, you can use the promo code THDC, and he will give you buy one, get one free on all West Brom prints. So thank you for letting me say that. It's nice to do a little plug for the podcast. And you can go and listen to us, and we talk about all kinds of nonsense. And I put special effects, not special effects, that sounds really... It's a special effects like feast. It's more sound effects, I guess, and bits of nonsense, because I have to edit it to be funny, unlike you here with your natural talent just allows you to flow for a conversation. I have to kind of interrupt myself to do it. I keep thinking about this, like the Marvel universe and the Marvel films, where like other characters will pop up in other people's films.
Yes.
And that's what this feels like. We've got like the West Brom podcast equivalent of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I've popped up in yours, and you've got a little bit of a Peter Parker vibe about you. And I'm kind of some sort of Hulk with this on. And yeah, that's what this has felt like a little bit.
Yeah. So, Jamie, where can people sort of listen to you and get involved via social media and stuff? Where do you think it's best to place the listener of this episode to go and get involved in your podcast?
So we are on Spotify, the Hawthorns Debate Club. If you search that, we'll come up. We're also on Apple Podcasts and all of the kind of places that you can usually find podcasts. We're there or thereabouts. We're on Instagram at the Hawthorns Debate Club. And we're also on Twitter as well, but you're going to have to look at the links in this because I can't remember what the Twitter handle is at all. And my brother looks after that, so you'll have to deal with him, not me.
Yeah, so we'll stick all the links for that in the podcast description and the YouTube description. So yeah, if you've enjoyed listening to Jamie talk about the Albion, you can do that every single week and listen to Jamie talk about the Albion over on the Hawthorns Debate Club. Check out the links in the description. But Jamie, a big thank you for joining me for this week's episode of the Baggies Podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on, and we'll let you go back to your home now.
Well, thank you for releasing me. I've missed my family and my children. It's been a difficult time while I've been your hostage, but I've really enjoyed it. Thanks for having me on, and I'll be sure to bring people back to you, hopefully, and send some ears your way as well. But thanks, mate. It's been really enjoyable chatting to you.
Absolutely, mate. It's been a pleasure to speak to you. But yeah, a massive thank you for listening to the Baggies podcast this week. If you have enjoyed it, of course, be sure to check out the Hawthorns Debate Club and be sure to subscribe to us over here on your podcast provider or YouTube and leave us a nice little review or a comment if you've enjoyed. But that does bring me to the end of the Baggies podcast for this week, and we'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.